Um, so we are going to get started. For those of you that are logging in, we're going to get started in just a minute or two. I do, before we begin, I would like to just acknowledge the land that I'm calling from, which is the New York metropolitan area. We acknowledge the traditional ancestral unceded homelands of the Lenape, the Munsee, the Manhattan, the Canarsie, the Matinecock, Shinnecock, and other indigenous nations. We respect that many indigenous people continue to live and work on this land and recognize their ongoing contributions to the region. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans whose labor built and developed this country during the colonial era and beyond. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and start the introduction. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event, Clifford Prince King in Conversation with Paul Mpagi Sepuya, presented by the Robert Giard Foundation. I'm Gabriel de Guzman, and I'm the Director of Arts and Chief Curator at Wave Hill, which is a public garden and art center in the Bronx. I'm also a current advisory board member of the Robert Giard Foundation. Before the advisory board, I was a foundation board member for 10 years from 2007 to 2017. The Robert Giard Foundation is a nonprofit that is deeply committed to supporting LGBTQ plus photographers and the value they bring to public discourse by empowering queer perspectives and communities. The Giard Foundation was launched following the death of the pioneering American photographer, Robert Giard, in 2002 to honor his legacy and to focus on the future of LGBTQ plus photography. Since 2008, the Giard Foundation has been awarding annual grants to self-taught, early career, or otherwise emerging LGBTQ plus photographers who illuminate aspects of gender and sexuality. This is the largest grant specifically for LGBTQ plus photographers, and the current application cycle is open until January 24th. So if you're interested in applying, you still have a few more days. And it's really one of the reasons that I've remained an advocate of this foundation for all these years is because of its critical support of emerging LGBTQ plus photographers, exceptional artists like Clifford. The work of the Robert Giard Foundation is made possible through your generosity and donations. And during this time, we invite you to support our efforts by going to our website's donation tab, which is at robertgiardfoundation.org. So let me just give a quick rundown of the evening. First, I'm going to introduce Clifford, and then he will give a brief presentation of his work. Following Clifford's talk, he will be joined for a conversation with Paul Mpagi Sepuya, and we will close with an audience Q&A. We invite the audience to add comments and questions to the Q&A section at any point during the evening, but we'll probably wait until the end of the talk to read your questions. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. We also provide closed captioning, which you can access by clicking the live transcription button at the bottom of your screen. Now I would like to introduce Clifford Prince King, who is the 2020 runner-up for the Robert Giard Grant for Emerging LGBTQ plus photographers. He has recently exhibited work at Jeffrey Deitch Gallery and Stars Gallery in Los Angeles, Mark Selwyn Gallery in Beverly Hills, Higher Pictures and the Leslie Lohman Museum in New York City, Light Work in Syracuse, and Mass MoCA. Publications carrying King's images as commissioned work and features include Aperture, Dazed, ID, T Magazine, The New York Times, Vice, Vogue, and The Wall Street Journal. His work can be found in the public collections of the Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Minneapolis Institute of Art, and the Studio Museum in Harlem. Clifford's work chronicles the tenderness and beauty of Black queer masculinity through an intimate and personal lens. His most recent project is a deeply personal account of life with HIV, the side effects and routine, the moments of domesticity, the warm encounters of friends and lovers. Building on the artistic legacy of the AIDS crisis, Clifford's photographs tell stories of sensuality and life in his community. With Black, gay, and bisexual men, the most likely group to be affected by HIV in the US, these stories are absolutely essential. To quote Clifford, these stories are out there, but some of them have been lost. I think that while we still can, we should speak for ourselves for the better, end quote. So without further ado, I'd like to give Clifford an opportunity to speak in his own words. Let's all please welcome Clifford Prince King.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the Robert Giard Foundation for their support in 2020, which was very much needed in lots of ways. I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the work I want to show everyone. So after graduating high school, I moved to Portland, Oregon. For whatever reason, I don't really remember. And I was just I've always taken photos, just like growing up, kind of as like a segue to meet people and to have this sort of push on interacting with people with kind of something to like approach people with, like, let me take your photo, or just like it made it easier for me to talk to people because I'm a pretty shy person. And so I was living in Portland, and I feel like, I was 20, 21, 22, and I just had like this really big void when it came to meeting other Black, queer people. And so I started like thinking about ways I could document their lives within their personal spaces without any like sort of agenda or goal. It was more so like a form of therapy and a way to kind of connect to others who were similar to me, and just like exchanging dialogue and just being in their personal space, which was really really kind and sweet of those people. So I really thank everyone that's allowed me into their spaces and has let me into their homes and just has been open to my creative process. This is the one I wanted to start with because this is one of the first portraits I've taken to kind of start this journey that I'm now on. I met this person on the street, I believe, and I was invited to their grandmother's house where he also lived. And I think this kind of catapulted this, like, not in any sort of I had no like intention on like just like doing any of this. It was more so just about exploring my Black, queer identity, and just like finding other people who would kind of help me on that journey, because it's not something that I feel like was easy for me to come about. And so I think with time and the efforts of people that I've met over the years, it's been it's been great, and I'm just really thankful. And so I kind of just started by, there were like maybe in Portland's a pretty white city. And so when there were creatives, Black queer people that I did know, we would hang out and we would just like document the time together and kind of try to, like, we would meet or we had met before, and And I think my overall practice is very much so just documenting time and the people around me, because I think growing up, I just felt very aware of like time passing and people like kind of leaving in and out of your life, and just certain moments that weren't always going to be there. And that kind of gave me some anxiety. So I think by documenting them, I kind of was able to have some release from that fear of like these moments just never being there anymore. And so I just started like taking pictures of people um, just that were living with me, because I feel like, you know, we're all here for this small amount of time. Cheesy, yes, but it just like gave me some relief to like have these images like in an archive, um, to for just for me or for other people to have for their own relationships too. Like this is my best friend on the top part, and you know we talk about how I've kind of like documented all of his boyfriends and relationships, and how it's kind of, you know, I feel like it's a service to me and also a service for the people that are around me, because, you know, these moments are very fleeting, and to kind of have them documented in the way that I choose and what feels good to me is like a nice reward and a way to kind of look back and see how far you've grown, see how things have changed. And um, so I guess I want to start by, this is a reference to Essex Hemphill's cover of Conditions. And this was taken in 2018. I didn't know who Essex Hemphill was until 2018, which is rather unfortunate. Um, but I think the reason why I wanted to recreate this image was to kind of um, just to bring up that person within my space, and the space that, or in a way that people would see that in my realm, because I think it's important to just like to rebirth certain images and ideas so that they're like in the contemporary world. Um, because I feel like had I known about Essex's work, um, maybe in high school or when I was 18 or something, I feel like I would have really skipped over a lot of challenges and would have kind of had more information on like my identity, and I could have really surpassed a lot of things that I didn't really need to go through. Um, and so I think with while recreating this work, I kind of hoped that maybe younger people or people who didn't know his work would get to know it and would maybe have some connections to it, to where they could like feel a little more seen and celebrated. Uh, and the same with this. This is a reference from Isaac Julian's film Looking for Langston, which I had seen maybe 4 or 5 years ago for the first time. And I mean, I'm sure most of y'all have seen it, but yeah, just like cinema with just gay black ballroom kind of scenes, I think was really kind of, I had never seen that before, and that kind of shifted a lot of gears in my brain. And so I kind of wanted to make something similar to reintroduce that to people who might not be known to that sort of artwork. Um, and just, I guess, speaking of cinema, like I have a pretty strong film background, just self-taught, just by myself watching movies like every day, and just like looking at stills on Tumblr. Um, I used to make films in high school, just like short films in like my digital media class run by Aaron Passmore. And and so like the way I've like taken on photo is just by thinking of it as a film. And so I think there's like, there's notes of film stills within like the photograph or however you want to interpret that. Um, and then I guess with this particular image, it's centered around Martin Luther King because I feel like that's kind of the first person that is discussed in school about historical Black figures, but also I think it's kind of just like an easy way to incorporate Black history within schools because of his practice and the nonviolent approach. And so I was thinking of him at this time and then thought about, gayness and queerness and how, being pro-Black does not also mean that you're pro-gay or pro other rights that can fall into that. So I thought about this kind of juxtaposition of two images of these two boys making out or whatever they're doing below this image. And then like I moved to LA after living in Portland for a while, and I started dating like other Black men for the first time. And I always had a camera, but I think it was just so special to kind of meet new people who had similar stories, and there's just like this unspoken connection that I had with some of these people. And a lot of my work is semi set up, but I feel like I really value the works that are just within my bedroom and my personal space, with people who have had trust in me and vice versa, physically and with my camera. And so I guess for this particular image was more so surrounding like anonymity and like Grindr and other apps. And the anonymity kind of stems from just keeping themselves safe and not having their face present, but also over time, I think the anonymity kind of, it was nice for other people to see that so they can kind of put themselves within that space. Because I feel like a lot of photos are, you see a really beautiful person and it's, the person's face and their expression is kind of like what draws you in. But I think the lack thereof can kind of allow everyone to participate in some kind of way and like be within that emotion or be within that space or kind of bring back a memory of nostalgia to like that point in time that someone else might have had. And so, yes, just chasing trade in Burbank at one point. And then, I think, with as my life progresses, as everyone else's, you like start to shift toward more romantic ideas. You have your fun, you kind of catch up. I feel like a lot of my photos were kind of helping me catch up on things I missed out on while coming out and kind of like finalizing and figuring out my identity. And so I think my photos have been a way of allowing me to have certain times, even by having those times through other people, by like setting up a certain fantasy that I've had or a certain dream or like this kind of gay utopia of like, what would it be like to just see this on the street and like be that person, like living that. Like, I think I'll speak for myself, but like, I feel like we all kind of see certain things at the corner of our eye on the street, whether it's like the way someone grabs someone's hip right before they cross the sidewalk, or just like little moments within human interaction that we can't really capture. And so I'll kind of see those kind of things and like take note of it, and we'll kind of try to remake that. Just because I feel like a lot of people experience those little things. Um, those little things will kind of just make you fall in love with someone if you're just like noticing how that level of care is very important. And so I kind of just try to recreate certain scenes that I feel like me myself really resonate with, as well as like other people can kind of resonate with. Like this picture, they were a couple at the time, they're not anymore, but just being alone in public because maybe like no one can host, or like, you know, there's family at home. um, but just the idea of queer people being outside, um, for safety, but also like outside also isn't safe. So kind of just thinking about that a lot, and then thinking about like Alvin Baltrop's work at the Piers, how, you know, they kind of found that space to just kind of be free and to express themselves sexually. And, you know, um, it's my cousin Zach. You know, and this is something that kind of I feel like can resonate with people. Is just like some like an after sex towel handover with maybe some look of disappointment. And I feel like maybe some of my work is like projecting my personal life onto it a little bit, but I feel like I really try to like think of situations and times that can kind of seem pretty dark, or, you know, a coming of age moment that can be like captured beautifully and shared so that like people don't feel too heavy about those moments. Because I mean they happen, and I feel like it's important to kind of put them on, like, you know, you go back in time and think, wow, that time's so silly, and I've grown so much from that. So I feel like this was kind of my way of doing that. um, just more friends, just allowing me to photograph them. uh, and I think the more I think about my work, the more I'm just very grateful, and I don't have any like pressure on it, because I feel like regardless of, you know, what might be happening with my practice or career or whatever, I would still be making this work. It's really like helped me in so many ways to just decompress, and also have moments with so many beautiful people, um, and just like share conversation. So like all of this feels like such a bonus. Um, so I think maybe it's because I didn't go to school that I don't really have, um, there's not much pressure on myself to really be anything in particular, or even like speak on my work in some sort of articulate kind of way. Um, I think I'm just really grateful to have all of these within my stack of negatives in my closet, just to kind of document my life. And I was actually reading about Robert Giard today, and it was kind of interesting to read some things, because I had never really looked at his work that much. I knew he was a really talented photographer. Um, but he said something about legacy and how, you know, the time is very fleeting and like can move forward really quickly. And like I said before, I have like, that's really sad to me. So I always try to like step back from like an instance or like a celebration or a gathering or a moment with a friend and try to memorialize it in some way, because you know it's not always gonna be like that. Um, um, I feel like I should talk about this one because I feel like this is a lot of has a lot of favoritism to it. I was really into the idea of, or not idea, but just like acts of care and how, you know, black folks, black queer folks kind of show up for each other in ways that's you can't really express. And so I this is a self like I put it on a timer, and so my roommate is braiding my hair, and um, I'm reading to him, and then my roommate's boyfriend at the time is supplying him with some smoke. And it's just, I feel like it's just like a triangle of care. And I had that image in my mind for a while, and I just wanted to express it and capture it. Um, oops, oops. Okay, so I was diagnosed with HIV in 2018, I think. And I was having night sweats as a form of symptom. And then one morning I just woke up and took a picture of my night sweats. Um, and it kind of, it was helpful to have this, you know, I feel like photography is a way of kind of slowly dealing with something that you don't want to deal with, or just a way of expressing yourself, but like also helping yourself to like think about something kind of dramatic in a way. Um, and so this is D'Angelo. I had met him maybe around the year that I was diagnosed, living in Burbank in this really empty apartment because I couldn't buy furniture at the time. And I think just like having community really helped that process. And, you know, this is Diedrich Bracken's. Um, and I think at that time I was looking for help a lot within like how would you say, like groups. I was looking for like a HIV group to kind of talk to someone about it and kind of feel less alone. And so I ended up kind of just like meeting other HIV positive people and talking with them about their experiences and feeling a lot better about the future. You know, as an anxious person, I kind of just kind of shut down a lot and was really seeking other queer Black people to help me um, with all the emotions. And then I met Frederick Weston at his home in Chelsea, and he's such a great person. Um, and he like gave me so much advice and told me lots of great things. And just like that kind of community really, and then documenting it, I feel like because Frederick passed last year, and I feel like it kind of really made me feel happy with how I navigate taking in photos of people, just because, as we know, things can be so here and gone. So think I'm just kind of holding on to that as far as my practice and just doing what feels good and not really worrying about much else. Um, this is part of my short film, Growing Each Day, um, which is like a moving image um, short film, obviously. Um, but I just wanted to remake some images from the past, but like make them move. So this is one of them. Um, it's two of my friends under a sheet, kind of like Fort style childhood, but kind of talking about, the idea that when you are, 16, 18, 21, that you are already liberated and stepping into your queerness, gayness, and what that kind of looks like, because like for me, it took like 23, 24 to kind of really feel comfortable or like feel whatever it was I needed to feel to be myself. And so that's why I kind of have this thing where I'm playing catch up to like all these experiences and people that I might have missed out on while going through that whole process. I don't know why this isn't here, but there's my butt. And then I think now I'm just kind of like having fun and really just enjoying alone time, enjoying catching light at a certain hour, and just exploring different types of ways of photographing myself and people. And yeah, I think I'm really grateful to be able to continue to make work without any pressure, really. I'm just very, yeah. Oops, did I do something wrong? But yeah, I don't know if that was long enough, but yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Clifford. Hold on a second. Yeah, thank you so much for that fascinating talk. And I find your work to be just like highly intimate and moving. And I really appreciate you sharing your work with us. So now I see that there are a couple of questions in the chat, in the Q&A section, but I would like to move on to the second part of our event, and then we'll take the questions at the end. Now we'd like to begin a discussion between Clifford and Paul Mpagi Sepuya. Paul Mpagi Sepuya is a Los Angeles-based artist working in photography and is an associate professor at University of California, San Diego. His work is in the collections of the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Getty and Guggenheim Museums, LA County Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Whitney Museum, among others. Recent exhibitions include solo shows at Vielmetter, Los Angeles, Document Chicago, a survey of his work at the Contemporary Art Museum in St. Louis, and the Seventh Athens Biennial. So again, we do invite the audience to add comments and questions to the Q&A section of the Zoom platform at any point during this discussion. But at this, like I mentioned, we're just going to wait until the end to read your question. So thank you so much for joining us, Paul. And Paul is actually a fellow advisory board member of the Robert Giard Foundation as well. Paul and Clifford, I'll let you take it away.
Hey, Paul.
Hey. Hey. How's it going? Great to see you.
It's good to see you too. I like your shirt.
Thank you. Yeah, we should have just like gotten one space.
Yeah.
I got it side by Then we could just jump in the frame together.
Versus.
Anyways, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, and maybe, if it's all right with other folks, I might take a look at the Q&A just to see if, if there's interesting things that come up in response. But I guess I'll just start by saying thank you so much for sharing this work. And I always love it when there's a chance to get to see things that I haven't seen before. And I think overall it's just been great to see how your work has grown, how the audience for it has grown. But can I ask one first question, which is like, how did the grant impact your work? Like, what did you do with that funding? You said it was important back in 2020.
I mean, I was working at a grocery store for like the last 4 years, and it was like during the pandemic, and it was just a lot. Like it was intense. People were like running in the store, like trying to get toilet paper. Remember that when everyone was trying to buy all the toilet paper? I was just like, oh my God. But it was able to like help me like sustain like the making photographs and just like being able to like do the extra stuff like while not working at a grocery store for X amount of time, and just like allowed me to just like be at home in peace without being at a grocery store every day during like Black Lives Matter movements and people scared about the virus and stuff.
Yeah.
So it and I bought a 4x5 camera, which has been fun to play with a little bit, but I think it just like added some like security to my life at that time, which was really, I didn't know I was gonna need that, but then it just like was very necessary.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that was great. I remember when you got that camera and, just thinking about, just what possibilities that opens up. There's something you were mentioning, because I wanted also to kind of like get more into how you take the kind of romanticism you were talking about and combining with like observation to construct images. Like, because I mean, just as an anecdote, like thinking about one of those days when we were biking around during the pandemic and like the streets are empty and like you having your point and shoot with you and your phone or something, you're like, oh wait, hey, I need to stop and like photograph this. And then thinking about the way you might come back and incorporate this, like just could you just talk more about how your work progressed from like the more informal snapshots to really kind of like embracing fantasy romanticism, but like really keen observation?
Well, I think I've always just been someone who just kind of like is really in the moment and like present, and that's why I'm kind of like quiet, because I'm looking at people, I'm listening to people, I'm like seeing the way that light is hitting that person's watch and how it's like shining on the, like just it's like, I don't know. I just feel like and in that moment, we were riding bikes together, and just like it was in the evening, the streets were empty. You see a space, and I think rather than like, there were times where I had my camera out, but then sometimes you kind of have to add another layer over it in order for it to be me. So I'm like, oh, there's this idea of this house with this light, with this garden. That's really beautiful on its own. But like, what if I made it Black and gay so that I can maybe like allow that to be like a possibility to that community where it's like that exists, you see it, it's there, it's achievable. It's not something that is just a fantasy anymore because you see it.
Yeah.
And so I have these fantasies of like what I want my life to look like, what I want other queer people's lives to look like. And if you just like make it seen, or like you make it, it's like that's doable.
Mhm.
But do you feel like similar in your practice? Like you like, or like, how do you feel like, because your work, like even like your earlier work, I feel like you
Mhm.
meet people off the street and you kind of bring them into a space and kind of explore an idea of
Yeah.
like
Well,
personhood. And
I mean, you're shy, but you have a way of approaching people, and I'm sort of the opposite. I'm like socially like really outgoing, but I don't think I've ever approached a stranger and said, "Oh my God," like stop them and be like, "Can I take your picture?" I've watched you do this.
wait,
And I'm
when?
just like, I'm like, damn. When we were at that dinner and you were like, I want to take a picture of that guy. And
Oh,
you went up and talked to
I
him.
did. That
It
was the cute bartender.
he was gorgeous. It was amazing. But I think I definitely really identified with that beginning of like the beginning of making photographs as really a way to get to know people. Like so I used it as a way to as an excuse to spend more time with people that I was just getting to know. Like the photograph didn't come first. It was like the meeting kind of like circling around these kind of like those first gay queer friendships and spaces and parties that you go to. And then it would be like, hey, we're getting to know each other. Let's like step out of the bar or the party or whatever and just like sit and like construct an image. Um, but now, like it was really interesting, just to make photos together in my studio as we were getting to know each other, um, and just like observe each other working kind of like side by side. Like that was just so much, it was just like so beautiful and so much fun. I love those images to this day.
Yeah, I feel like that was like a really big moment. Because I think Melanie Flood, the person I had a show with first, showed me your work, and I was like, whoa. And you know what she said to me? And she's like, reach out now before he goes, he's just like unreachable. And I was like, I should just like say hi. And I said hi, and then we like met, and then it was really special. I think about
Mhm.
that time a lot. Um,
Yeah. That was 2017?
I think it was like 2018 or something.
2018? Okay. Yeah.
But
I'm so bad at time.
that's why I take photos to document it. You
Indeed.
know, I
Yeah.
feel like things just like slip away. Do you ever like look at old photos and you're like, whoa, where was I at that time? Like,
All the time. All the time. And I guess maybe this is something interesting to talk about because I think we've both in our work used making photographs as a way of like, I think processing something that's happening that might be too much in that moment, but it also gives you something to look back on. And I don't do that as much now since I've been doing these like crazy constructions and stuff. But like that earlier work, I've had a lot of experiences of having made portraits when I was going through something and I realized what I was looking for in making a portrait with this friend or in the context of this relationship or friendship. And years later, coming back and talking with that friend about that work and realizing all that they held in it that I wasn't even aware of.
right.
And how there's always this opportunity to kind of like that as much as we can sort of intend and sort of create and aim to get from it, whether it's understanding of these these spaces of friendship and care or and trauma. So have you ever ended up having conversations with people in the work that revealed something that they held that you didn't know?
Well, actually, I was just about to say when we made those photos in your studio, I was diagnosed like that week. And
What?
remember, I think I told you maybe like
Oh,
drunkenly, like one time, where like
yeah. I
that
didn't
week,
realize it that week.
yeah, because like I was working at 356 Mission as
Yeah.
their intern, and then I was like studio assisting you for like a week or so. And it
Hmm.
was that during that time is when I was diagnosed, and I was just like, whoa, it was just like crazy. But
Wow.
I look at those photos and I remember like that was like just like my body, like your body changes a lot. Like I think it was like 120 pounds. It was just like kind of crazy. But I think about that, and then I think within my own work, just like relationship dynamics, like people really change. Well, I mean, change is good.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's been interesting to see how people grow, like spiritually, like mentally. But like that has been by far like the most like you can see the change.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's with everyone. Every time I look at any image, I'm like, oh yeah, there was that time that we had this. It just like puts like a such a an image to a memory,
Mhm.
which is like nice because then you look at it and you're just like, wow, like that time, and then you kind of have this like spiral of reliving that past. But it's even if it's negative, it's still good because you experienced it at least, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wow. We're gonna have to catch up
I know.
on so much more like underneath the surface. But um, is it all right if we address some
Oh
questions from folks?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's see. Gabriel, did you want to
yeah,
ask
I can.
questions or?
Yeah, I can read the questions that are
Mhm.
that people have been submitting. Yeah, there are a ton of questions in here. So I'm just going to read them in order of in the order that they came in. Um, so this one is asking if you could, Clifford, if you could briefly, you mentioned briefly that you referenced Essex Hemphill, Essex Hemphill.
Mhm.
Can you talk about what role poetry plays in your work? And do you ever see yourself exploring other mediums of art making?
Um, well, I read Ceremony and Conditions, and I think I'm not very good with words, and I think you know, even Langston Hughes, Exis Hemphill, their words are well, Langston Hughes's words are more visual. I'm a very visual person, so like that really helps to like feel what someone's saying. Like if you feel what I'm saying, that's kind of something I enjoy feeling what someone's saying versus like hearing it, you know. And Langston Hughes does that for me. But Essex Hemphill, his poetry is very like raw and to the point, and I think that made me feel really validated in a way because I'm not like an academic person, and so like if I were to think about poetry, I want to hear it straight up. Like tell me like what's going on. And I feel like he used just like a vocabulary that was special to me. Like
Mhm.
if you're gonna say you got HIV by semen, like you just say the all the dirty words, in almost like a very postmodern style that I was really drawn to. Um, and I guess in my own practice, I've like had nights where I've just like not like wrote a poem, but I'll just write in general,
Mhm.
and like some like breaks and like stanzas form or whatever, and I'll read it maybe like a year later and be like, this is interesting. Like I don't think there's any rules to it, and so I feel like just like sharing what you feel has been really good versus like thinking about it and like really overthinking about, you know,
Mhm.
does that do it for the question?
Thanks. Yeah. So another question is, I love the way your photography quietly suggests a broader narrative. Unfortunately, I see a lot of queer artists being pressured to create very saturated work that recycles imagery because quieter work is not as quote unquote commercially successful. What are your thoughts on that?
Quieter work. What's quieter work?
Mhm.
That's interesting. Do you want to do you Do you know what that?
I'm thinking like more like I kind of wanted to ask a similar question. Maybe kind of like framing that as like we're in a moment where like queer, black, trans, indigenous, people of color, like there's a commercial like moment to consume and use. Like
Right,
it's this like trap of visibility, and maybe
right.
thinking about it as like, what is it? How do you navigate that? And what does it
Oh,
make work that's not so just like, I'm just gonna play to all the notes that like
for
everyone
sure.
wants.
I think it's just about the person, and even like the times that I did do that with like the references to Langston or Essex Hemphill and Isaac
Mhm.
Julian. Those were both 2016, 2018. 2020 is a different, we're all. I'll stop there, but I wouldn't do that now. But I feel like even now, it's just like artists making work with people laying down in a field naked. Like I get that for sure, how it's like oversaturated. And I think it's just about the like connection. Like, why did you do that? Because that's been done, Laura Aguilar, like in the desert nude. Like we've seen that. But I
Mhm.
think it's just like the way the person contextualizes why they did that and what it does for them, I think is important. But if you're just like some Instagram baddie with a little, what do they call those things? Jockstrap in the desert. Like that's not, and like everyone's lens and everyone's vision is unique. And so like I'll have an idea that me and Paul might both have, but we're both gonna do it differently.
Mhm.
And so I think it's just more about the person and the relationship between the reasoning,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah. There's those moments where you see like you're talking about, we're having these similar ideas and we have our own ways of doing them, but those moments where they converge is
Mm-hmm.
also so beautiful. And I
Right.
love the kind of like, I think of them as like sometimes, amongst friends and collaborators, there's those moments, but also just like unexpected ancestors that we didn't know we had. I feel like when you're talking about like
Right.
Essex and stuff, it's like, oh, why didn't we know about this? But I come across artists all the time and I'm like, I so identify with this. And I see where they were asking this
Mm-hmm.
question and started to say it better than I was. And I don't think of it as like in the same way at all as like a commercial way of
Right.
pushing people into something like recognizable, but it's just like,
Right.
wow, this is deep. It's just deep and we're connected.
Right. But even like you rejuvenating that idea, I think is like special because like I want to know that now,
Mhm.
but like I'm not really doing research as a person or an artist because research now is Instagram and bad feelings. Or like you can like get it's just hard to like, I don't really, people will like name drop and
Yeah.
like talk about artists. I'm just like, I don't know those artists. Like if they're meant to be in my vision, like they'll just come to me in a way that's like organic and
Mhm.
ultimately fulfilling. But whenever I do any kind of research, it's just kind of like discouraging, or like people are like, well, that's been done before, or like, or that's, and I get that, but it's, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Someone else asks, mentions that you talked about taking inspiration from romantic or idealized moments you've seen in real life and recreating them in your work, but also capturing candid moments with people in your life. Which process do you enjoy more?
Definitely like the candid ones. Just because there's no expectation from um myself for that to be ever seen, and
Mhm.
I think my
Mhm.
friend Charlie asked that. Hi Charlie. Um, but it's just that you're just like more surprised. And I think that's also working with film, is that you just like, I don't process my own film yet, but just like turning that just like turning it in and being like, oh wow, like that looked really great. But like I didn't even care. There was like no aperture set. It was just like I just, finished, and then my camera's there and just there's it was, so it just feels more of like a it just feels like bigger than myself. So that's always a little nicer to like see.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this might be a little bit of a follow-up to that. How do you handle the vulnerability that entails photographing yourself in intimate settings?
I don't know.
I mean, do you see it as vulnerable, or?
I mean, I see it as vulnerable, but I think I like really wanted to be in, like I really loved Ren Hang.
Mm.
Like when I was like 18 and on Tumblr. And I think just like the vulnerability that his models had for him was just like admirable. And I feel like I admire people who are just very sharing of themselves, um, regardless of like any whatever it is. Like you're walking around, like you're giving yourself to for the expression of someone else or myself. So I think I don't know if I've ever felt, maybe like the HIV aspect was a little scary, but it was just, that was more part about like making, like destigmatizing and just like being another person on the list who is like open and like is like fine, because there's nothing to be like, there's nothing, you don't have to hide about that, I think that's why I did that.
Mhm.
But hopefully like other people can just be like, oh yeah, I have HIV, it's similar to diabetes, it's like whatever,
Mhm.
like you don't need to hide. um
Mm-hmm.
it's all a journey and process.
Yeah. And this one is from somebody you might know, Adam Davis.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he says, I'm so blown away by your work. Hearing more context about the image regarding your night sweats was phenomenal. Before today, I thought that it was another post-sex moment that mirrored the other intimate moments you've shared. Can you speak on the potential dualities that exist within the images you make, staged or candid, especially within the canon of queer Black photography?
The dualities that exist. I think like there's a time, and I feel like Paul, you can kind of agree. It's like there's a moment where your brain is like more active than others, where it's like, oh, I have this idea, I want to do it tomorrow. It's like
Mm-hmm.
jot, jot, jot. Who is it going to be? But then there's other times where it's just like, it's, you can't really capture that unless it's really kind of ongoing or like there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a great question. I just feel like whatever is like, I'm like rereading the question. Stage or candid. I don't. I think it's fun to like for people to guess which ones are like staged and not.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
I think my hope is that they're all candid looking, because I want those to be like possible things to have been like seen at that time,
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
because
And
those moments are so fast that you can't really like get them. But
yeah, also it makes me think of like that comment about the night sweats image, which I hadn't known that either. And one that I'd seen before, and it makes me just think about what the limits of what a photograph can actually show. Like because we see the sheets, we see the crumpled sheets, we know there was a body there, we see that it's stained with moisture, but we don't know which bodily fluid it is. So we can't inspect the cloth, right? So we use whatever sort of information we have, and there's like a duality in that as well. But also it seems like you're talking about like the like if you recreate, if I take a picture of something and I set it up based on something that I already knew or imagined or felt, is it any less real than a candid moment? Because even a candid moment, there's aspects of like framing or cropping, or you decide sort of where to be that like, I think there's a lot of tension in that sometimes when we can just sort of be like, they're all, what it's talking about is all true and here. And yeah, I think it's just like a beautiful like space that photography kind of is just like, it's here and we're not going to have to answer or define all of those.
There was this one person I was talking to from India who was like, I love that photo so much because in India it's so hot there. And he was just kind of talking about how like, you know, access to like AC and stuff, and like how that's how his bed would look every morning in the summer. And that's why he loved it so much. But I was like, you really took that image and like I want everyone to enjoy it. So, like just like making something kind of universal in a way, I think is like important, to where it's like your own interpretation, whatever. But I think that's why I don't really talk that much, because you can kind of like make your own art within the art and not really have like clear answers, and then it becomes like something that you don't, I don't know.
Yeah.
No.
We're starting to go over a little bit on time, but I would like to, if it's okay, I'd like to take a couple more questions. So can you describe the feelings that go through your body when you stop and ask a stranger for a picture?
It's usually like I do like a sort of pre-camera hello. Okay. It's like, or like I think in the past most of the strangers I've photographed have been from like an app. So it's like either like some sort of like sexual service, and then it's like, oh, I'm a photographer too. Can you are you how would you feel if like I just like took a picture of you? Like you don't have to show your face or anything. And they're usually like, yeah, like I'll show my face. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like I don't really, you know what I mean? I think so there's like different types of approaching strangers about it, but I think on the street it's more so about making sure they don't know that I'm like, because like no one, people are so aware of cameras now and like where they could go, and like internet, TikTok, whatever people are using. So I think I haven't really been taking pictures on the street since the pandemic, but it is definitely like when I am like given that permission, which is like another level of like a rush, like permission. No matter how it turns out, it's always just like a blessing almost. You know. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on that, Paul, in terms of like when you've approached strangers for a picture?
And yeah, like I don't like approach a stranger to take a picture, but there's this sort of like discussion about what kind of image might be happening, what sort of what ideas I'm thinking about, what kind of project is currently happening. I think one of the questions that it makes me think about is kind of the shift that happens from like thinking about the images that I was making in Brooklyn that relate so much to the images that Clifford was making in Portland, right? Where you're making the work out of this urgent need to just connect.
Yeah.
And you're not even thinking about them. You know, maybe at the time we had Tumblrs and whatever. I love the idea of Tumblr education overall. It's like there's so much. But we didn't think about like if this work was going to go on the wall in a gallery or whatever. Like it was more about like, oh, let me give a friend a copy of this print or whatever when I get a little picture. And then the audience changes and then the requests change, because then it goes to something different where then people are asking you, where there's a space that you've created for the work. And I think the practice becomes like a stage that people are interested in being a part of, being in. So it's like, it's more about negotiating, like at what point do new people enter into the work. And that's just something that I think happens over time, and especially as and platforms and access to audiences and stuff changes. So something, that's why I think it was really important when we met and just talking about work. And then, and that was at that moment where I was like, oh, I have all these friends who are photographers, like, rather than making portraits of them, like, let's make images side by side. And leading to this, so that it's not just this one way. And then it was for the idea for the Whitney Biennial, it's like, well, let's put Clifford's work and the other people's images on the wall as the primary work, in order to understand that, like, we're all working in this sort of like together. So I guess sorry, I've gone off topic from thinking about strangers, but I just do think a lot about like the thinking really carefully about like who we are in like relationship in the images, especially when so many other people are other artists.
I think I'm going to ask one more question because I think it's a nice tie into what you were talking about, Paul. This is from Jonathan, who's on the board of the foundation. He says, Clifford, that the work is so deeply moving. Can you talk about the way that making the photos enables you to know the subject and the situation, and the way that making the photo is also a way of finding out about yourself, a way of knowing what you think and feel?
I mean, just like being in like a semi-private space with someone that you admire from afar, or like know a little bit of, but like don't know very much about, and just like kind of having like tea or like a drink. I feel like it's almost just, I mean, I didn't really grow up having a lot of like friends who were queer or Black because I grew up in Arizona. And so I think just like seeking that connection was like a priority to me in my young adult life. And so, and like I really like to like observe and like listen to people and hear their stories. So I think that's always been the reward, and like the photo was kind of a bonus. And so I think, I learn about myself through other people a lot just by hearing their experiences and how it kind of compares to mine, or like doesn't compare to mine, but maybe like we can both kind of help each other in some kind of way with like guidance or advice. I don't know. I mean, I encourage everyone to talk to strangers because like you never know, and I think it's really cool to like, because there's like almost like this like guard that's down when it comes to like what you can talk about. Like there's not really judgment because you don't know my life, I don't know yours, but like we're both in somewhat of the same community, so we can kind of like have this banter. So I think that's like the nicest part.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we should wrap up. Does anyone have any final words or thoughts that they want to share?
I mean, I just want to say thank you to the Giard Foundation for bringing this all together. Thankful for, thank you to Clifford for your friendship, and, and Gabriel, getting to know you when I was on the board, it was so great to like get to see you for all of our meetings and just your work over the years. It's been such a joy to be connected to the Giard Foundation over the years, because like one of my just like passions is supporting artists. Like all of the day jobs I've had have always been about supporting artists. All the like volunteer work and extra stuff has been about that. And now it feels like an extension of teaching, but like in a way that's not about like telling people what something is, but about just like having conversations, you know, like which
and
I think
sharing stories and
sharing, yeah, that's really saying like we're here to learn from the people that we're supporting and that we're working with. And I've learned just like so much from Clifford, like as a friend and fellow artist and everything. So that's my final word. I love y'all.
what a beautiful way to wrap up. That was really beautiful, Paul. So I want to say
everyone.
I want to say a lot of thank yous before we go. So thank you to Clifford Prince King, Paul Mpagi Sepuya. Thank you for this conversation and just like talking to us about your work and the connections that you share. I want to thank the Robert Giard Foundation and the board. Thank you to Sasha for your wizardry behind the scenes. And most of all, I want to thank everyone in the audience. We really appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining us. Everybody have a wonderful night.
Thank you, everyone. Take care of each other.
Bye.